Rights Institute. I'm Rachel Davison Humphries, your host this week and every week here on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. So today is March 1st, which is the start of Women's History Month. So woo, Women's History Month. All this month, BRI and the country will be celebrating women's rights, women's suffrage, the history of women, and their contribution to the history of the United States. Women's History Month itself didn't really become a full month until 1981, and that was 40 years ago already, which that doesn't make sense. But 1981 was the first time that Women's History Month was written into law, and since then there have been huge strides for women in America. Actually, if we go back a little bit further, the first woman to be elected to Congress, Jeannette Rankin from Montana, was in 1916. This incoming cycle, so the 2021 election, we had 143 women in the House of Representatives. That's 26.7% of seats, and 24 seats in the Senate, which is 24%. So to go from 0 to 25, 26% is significant. There's more work to be done. One of the things that Bill of Rights instituted, actually, in anniversary of the 100th anniversary of women getting the right to vote last year, we produced a resource called Votes for Women, which is a full curricular resource on the history of women's suffrage. The reason we did that was not only it was a great story to tell, it's great for you to learn from. You can find all of that on our website. There's a link in the chat below. But we also were asking the question, what does constitutional social change look like? So at BRI, we look at constitutional principles and virtues as the foundational work that we do underneath all of our curricular resources. So asking how did those principles intersect with change agency, with creating change in society? So we looked at Votes for Women because through our Votes for Women curriculum, we looked at constitutional change as a force of social change. There are lots of other ways that one can do social change, but specifically, what is the long, arduous, complex process of changing the American Constitution to be more equitable and just? And so throughout the Votes for Women curriculum, you see this change agency timeline asking, what is constitutional social change? How do we support it in America? How do we think about that in America? So all this month, BRI is going to be looking at women and their contribution. We have our Bridge from the Past with Mary is going to look at Dorothea Lange. Our close read later in the month is going to be how the Cherokee women address their nation. If that's an essay you've never read, it's a fantastic essay. A lot of the Native American Indian populations were writing about their experience of freedom and liberty in the early republic, and writing to each other, writing to the American government, and trying to adjudicate what their rights were. And so when it comes to what the essence of rights is, it's always interesting to look at how the Native peoples, American Indian populations were thinking through that at the time. So we'll be looking at the Cherokee women addressing their nation. And then we also have a lot of other things going on when it comes to rights and equality and justice. So when we think about the history of women's rights in the United States, the history of women in the United States is this constant move towards equality, constant move towards being seen as equal under the law and not having special laws against you that either are supposed to support you but end up restricting your ability to make choices, but really to be equal under the law, to have all Americans equal under the law. And so as you think about that incremental constitutional social change, one of the things we wanted to let you know about is 2 opportunities to have your young people, those young people you know, do work in that constitutional social change. The first is MyImpact Challenge, which is a cohort based resource. So we have MyImpact Challenge is a curriculum that we designed for social impact. So whether that's civic engagement or service learning, social impact curriculum that has students work through, again, constitutionally rooted social change theory. So how is an entrepreneur a good citizen, and how do you change through entrepreneurship? How is a government good for citizens, and how do you change through government? And then how do you change through charity and philanthropy as well? So it has students look at those 3 pillars and then design a project of their own. We believe that young people are are powerful agents in our society that aren't always given the support to be those change makers. And so we created the MyImpact Challenge, which takes that curricular resource, asks them to create a project or walks them through how to create a project, and then gives them a citizenship fair where they can showcase their project like a science fair, and also supports them with prizes. So if you specifically have young people in Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Connecticut, Tennessee, or Kansas, or any young person, go to our MyImpact Challenge curriculum, and we'll get that. We'd love to hear your thoughts and have your students and young people involved in that project. The other thing that we're doing, so very clearly touching on the history of women's suffrage and votes for women, is our We the Students essay contest. So every year the Bill of Rights Institute has an essay contest, and it ends in April. It opens up on Constitution Day. And so this year the question is, what is the relationship between equality and justice? So over the course of this month, we're going to be looking a lot. I'm going to be talking a lot about the relationship between equality and justice, but I'm not sure, other than the civil rights movement, the women's history, women's suffrage movement in the United States very clearly showcases the importance of a thorough and thoughtful understanding of that relationship. As Americans, we have equality and justice written into all men are created equal and endowed with their creator with inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And so I think I did that right. You can tell me if I did that wrong. What the relationship is between equality and justice is something Americans have thought about since before we were Americans. And so helping your young people think through that, they only have to write an 800-word essay and they could win $10,000 or $5,000, not $10,000, $5,000. So if you go to our website, you'll see We the Students Essay Contest. I think that, again, Votes for Women, the start of Women's History Week, anniversaries of the history of women's suffrage all over the place this time of year. So what is the relationship between equality and justice? Let's sit with that question this month. And I will be here every week thinking through that with you, telling you about what's happening at the Bill of Rights Institute and in civic learning across the country. My name is Rachel Davison Humphries. Thank you so much for being here. I encourage you to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you want to talk about. What's important to you this week when it comes to civic learning and civic engagement? I'd love to hear from you. There's chat, there's comments. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I think that's it for now, maybe more in the future. But thank you so much for being here. My name is Rachel Davison Humphries, and I will see you.